we are going to go over the stories and the graphs that you guys did over the past 2 days. So I'm going to read the stories and I'm going to kind of like sketch out what the graphs should have looked like and talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that were made in the stories. So we're going to start with number one. So number one, it says Isaac was playing Grand Theft Auto 5, and when he started the mission, he was 5 miles in elevated land. So here he is. He's 5 miles away, so that checks out. Then he drives 1 mile down a hill in 3 minutes. So here he is going 1 mile in 3 minutes, so that checks out. Then he stops and pauses the game for 4 minutes. So here he is pausing the game for 4 minutes. Then he went downhill at full speed at a trailer and rammed it out a river that was 4 miles down, and he did this in 1 minute. So the 4 miles down part is correct, but he actually did this in 2 minutes and not 1 minute. But other than that, everything else was correct in the story. So your graph should have looked very similar to this. The only difference should be that you should have, on your graph, you probably drew a steeper slope here, okay, because that's what it said in the story. But other than that, pretty good. All right, story 2. So it says, a cheetah runs 8 meters in 4 seconds. So here he goes. He runs 8 meters, and he does that in 4 seconds. So that checks out. Then it says, this is where things get a little bit weird because the story actually forgets to mention this part where he pauses for 2 seconds. Okay, it kind of forgets about that, and it kind of skips over to here. So then it says, he turns around in 2 seconds in 4 meters. Okay, so he turns around, and it takes him 2 seconds to go 4 meters. So that part there checks out. So then at this point, there's no motion. So here there's no motion, but unfortunately the story doesn't tell us how long there's no motion for. So you may have just drawn a straight line there. So then it says that the cheetah sees a gazelle and runs back to the original direction for 4 seconds and 4 meters. So that means he's running back up, and it takes him 4 seconds to go 4 meters. Okay, so that checks out. Then it says he catches the cheetah. He turns around, launching himself 8 meters in 1 second. So here he goes, turns around, launches himself 8 meters, and he does that. And it says 1 second, but it actually takes 2 because that's 14 and that's 16. But he actually does that in 2 seconds and not 1 second. So most of the parts of the story were pretty good, except for here, because this whole part was forgotten, and then, of course, the time here. So your graph probably went up like this, and then it went down, and then it went over, and then it went up, and then it went down, okay? But for the most part, it would have looked similar to this, but just missing that piece there. Okay, the next graph, all right, it says, let me grab the right story here. All right, it says Nathan and Emily were loitering for 4 seconds and were 12 meters away from the park. So here they are starting 12 meters away, and they're loitering for 4 seconds. So, yep, that checks out. Then we went hiking up a mountain, and it took 6 seconds to get to the top, okay? So we know that they hiked for 6 seconds, but unfortunately, it doesn't tell us how high up the mountain they hike. So according to the graph, it should have been they hiked an additional 12, but it doesn't tell us in the story how far. We just know that they went for 6 seconds. Then it says we paused for 10 seconds. So here they are pausing for 10 seconds. Then we went back down 20 meters in 10 seconds. So here they are, and they go back down 20 meters in 10 seconds. And then we went back to loitering for 4 seconds. So here they go, not moving. So pretty good, except for the fact here that we don't know how high up they actually hiked on the mountain. So your graph should have looked a little bit similar to this. The only thing is we wouldn't know how long this line actually is. But other than that, it was pretty good. All right, graph 4 we have here. So graph 4 says, it took Freddie 5 hours to drive up a 3-kilometer hill. So here he is, he's driving up a 3-kilometer hill, and that takes 5 hours, so that checks out. He parked, and then there was a 3-hour delay. So there he is, 3-hour delay, so no motion there because he's parked. Then the delay was over, and now he started to climb a 9-kilometer mountain that took him 4 hours. So climbs up the 9-kilometer mountain, and that took him 4 hours. Then he stopped for a water break for 2 hours. So there he is stopping to drink some water for 2 hours. Then he had to leave, so he climbed down 12 kilometers. So there he goes. He climbs all the way down. And that takes him 6 more hours to get down the mountain. So you should have been able to recreate this graph exactly based on the story that was given. So your graph should have looked exactly like this one. So good job on that one. All right, graph 5. It says a car is resting at a stoplight for 3 seconds. So there it is. It's resting for 3 seconds. The car then accelerates after the light turned green at a constant speed of 8 meters for 8 seconds. So here it goes. So it's going 8 meters, and it takes it 8 seconds to go the 8 meters. There was a car chase, and the car stopped for 5 seconds. So here now the car is stopping for 5 seconds. Afterwards, the car turns around onto a highway, and he does this for 6 meters for 2 seconds. So the car turns around, okay, and it goes down 6 meters, and it does this in 2 seconds. The trunk of the car then popped open, and they had to stop the car to put it back down for 2 seconds. So here they are, stopped for 2 seconds, putting the trunk down. So the car was slowing down for 2 meters, and this took 5 seconds because of a stoplight. So here it is slowing down, okay, 2 meters in 5 seconds. And then it rested for 4 seconds. So here it is resting for 4 more seconds. So your graph should have looked exactly like this one. So you start out with no motion, then you're accelerating, then you got no motion again. Okay, then you've turned around, your line should be going down. Period of no motion. Okay, you're going down again, and then a period of no motion. So you should have been able to follow the story and get this graph. This was probably the most complex graph that you guys did. All right, graph number 6. Okay, it says, a bird goes into a garden. He is 3 meters from my house. Okay, so we're starting 3 meters from the house. The bird moves 1.5 meters closer to my house, and he does this in 2 seconds. So the bird's moving towards the house, and he does this in 2 seconds, so that checks out. Then it stops and looks around the garden for 2 seconds. So here's the birdie looking around the garden for 2 seconds. Then he moves 1 meter closer to my house again. Okay, so here he does, moving 1 meter closer to the house again. So the only issue we have there is it doesn't tell us how many seconds that took. So it should have said that the bird moves 1 meter to my house in 1 second. So that was the one issue we had there, is we don't know the time. But then it says, I make a noise and scares it, so it stops for 2 seconds. So here it is, no motion for 2 seconds. And then it starts to look around and flies 2.5 meters away. So we know that it flies 2.5 meters away, but we don't know how long that takes. So we wouldn't be able to calculate the slope here. So you should have gotten the gist of the graph, all right? But the only things here are we didn't know the time here, and we didn't know the time here, so we wouldn't have been able to accurately draw those slopes, okay? All right, graph number 7. So graph number 7 says, we travel 1 kilometer up the Himalayan mountains, and we do this in 0.2 hours. So they travel 1 kilometer up, and they do this in 0.2 hours. So that checks out. We looked at the view for 0.2 hours. So here they are. They're just looking around for 0.2 hours. They're not traveling anywhere. We went 0.75 kilometers back down the mountain, and we did this in 0.2 hours. So there they go. They go back down. All right, and they did that in 0.2 hours. Then we ran 1 kilometer back up the mountain in 0.4 hours. So here they are. They're running another kilometer up, and they do this in 0.4 hours. So you should have been able to recreate this exact graph because you had all of the pieces of information that you would need, and they were all correct. So your graph should have looked very, very similar to this. Okay, actually, it should have been identical to this. And then our last graph, graph number 8. It says a cheetah ran 10 meters in 1 second. Okay, so it does that. Then he stopped to calm down for a second. So there he is, calming down for a second. Then he ran 30 meters in 3 seconds. So here he goes. He runs 30 more meters, and he does that in, 3 seconds. Okay. And then he ran down a 10-meter hill in 1 second. So there he goes, running down that 10-meter hill, and does that in 1 second. So your graph should have looked exactly like this graph as well, because you had all of the pieces of information that you needed to be able to draw the graph accurately. So that's all the answers to the graphs. Hopefully, if one of your stories was one that I said maybe had a little bit of issues, hopefully you understand those issues, and hopefully you don't make those same mistakes on the test. So I know originally I said the test was on Monday, but it's actually going to be pushed to Tuesday. So happy Valentine's Day for that. Today you're getting a study guide. Make sure you fill the study guide out, all right, and then study it, because what good is a study guide if you don't actually study it? And then tomorrow is your benchmark, so please make sure that you try your hardest on your benchmark. If you want to study, the best thing for you to study is your anchor charts. Don't freak out too much about it. Just try your best on it. But other than that, you just need to finish your study guide. You want to have that finished for Monday so we can talk about it in class. And I will see you guys Monday. Have a good weekend.